Amanda Lawson's seemingly perfect marriage unravels when she discovers her husband Eric's secret affair with Rachel, a manipulative and obsessive woman. As Amanda confronts betrayal, financial deceit, and a calculated scheme to destroy her life, tensions escalate into a dangerous battle for control and survival. With threats, stalking, and explosive confrontations, the story dives into themes of infidelity, manipulation, and revenge, leaving viewers outraged at the shocking betrayals and desperate to see justice served. It was a crisp autumn evening in October 2023, and the golden hues of fall leaves blanketed the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood. The streets smelled faintly of bonfires and pumpkin spice, and porch lights glowed warmly against the encroaching dusk. It was the kind of setting you'd expect to find in a feel-good holiday movie. But for Amanda Lawson, the scene felt more like the calm before a storm. Amanda stood in her kitchen, humming along to an old love song playing on the radio as she carefully arranged candles around a homemade chocolate cake. Tonight wasn't just any night, it was her and Eric's 7th wedding anniversary, a milestone she'd been looking forward to for months. Eric Lawson, her husband of 7 years, was the kind of man who turned heads without trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly charming. He had the kind of confidence that made people trust him instantly. He worked in corporate finance, and his demanding job often kept him late at the office. But Amanda had always believed that the sacrifices were worth it. After all, he was building their future. She glanced at the clock. 7:45 p.m. Eric was supposed to be home by 7. Maybe traffic. She shrugged it off and adjusted the framed wedding photo sitting on the counter. In the picture, Eric's arm was wrapped protectively around her waist, both of them grinning like they had the world at their feet. She smiled at the memory, but the longer she stared at the photo, the more something felt off. The vibration of her phone pulled her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Eric. "Running late. Big client meeting. Don't wait up, love you." Amanda's stomach sank. 7 years, and this was how they were celebrating. She shook her head, brushing the thought away. Maybe he really was stuck at work. After all, Eric had never given her a reason not to trust him. Deciding not to let the night go to waste, Amanda poured herself a glass of wine and lit the candles on the cake anyway. She took a deep breath, trying to focus on the positives, but the house felt too quiet, too empty. That's when she noticed it. The faint smell of cologne lingering near the hallway. Not Eric's usual musky scent, but something sharper, spicier. Her brows knitted together. Had he switched colognes without mentioning it? Before she could dwell on it, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Amanda set her glass down and walked to the front entrance, expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor. But the sight that greeted her wasn't what she'd anticipated. Standing on the porch was Julia Henderson, Amanda's best friend since college. Julia's fiery red hair and bold fashion sense always made her stand out. But tonight, she looked pale and uneasy, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. "Julia, what's wrong?" Amanda asked, stepping aside to let her in. Julia hesitated before crossing the threshold, her eyes darting around the room. "Amanda, we need to talk." Amanda's heart skipped a beat. "Is everything okay?" Julia bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. "No, it's not. I didn't know how to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth." A cold knot began to form in Amanda's stomach. The truth about what? Julia handed her a folded piece of paper. Amanda unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the printed text. A hotel receipt from the weekend before. Her fingers tightened around the paper as the reality sank in. The name on the reservation, Eric Lawson. Her mind raced. This can't be right. Maybe it's work-related. "It's not work, Amanda." Julia's voice broke, and her eyes filled with tears. "I saw him. With her, I didn't want to believe it, but I followed him after he left the office Friday night." Amanda felt the floor shift beneath her. Her knees buckled, and Julia caught her before she collapsed. "I'm so sorry," Julia whispered, holding her tightly. The next few hours passed in a blur. Amanda replayed every moment of the past few months, searching for signs she'd missed. The late nights, the sudden phone calls, the way he'd been more distant lately. It all fit, but she had refused to see it. At 11 p.m., her phone buzzed again. It was Eric. Still at work. Don't wait up, love you. Amanda stared at the screen, her pulse pounding. Her hand shook as she set the phone down. He was lying, right to her face. Julia squeezed her hand. You don't have to deal with this alone. We'll figure out what to do next. But Amanda's mind was already racing ahead. She wasn't the type to sit back and cry. No, she wanted answers, and she was going to get them. By the time Julia left, Amanda had made up her mind. She would confront Eric the next morning. But first, she needed evidence. She started with his emails, logging into his account using the password he had once given her, just in case. At first, it was nothing but work messages and newsletters, but then, buried under a folder labeled miscellaneous, she found it. A string of messages with someone named R. I can't wait to see you again. Last weekend was amazing. I love you. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She scrolled further, her hands trembling. Attached to one email was a photo. A woman, dark-haired and glamorous, smiling at the camera in what looked like the very same hotel room from the receipt. Amanda's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to keep reading dates, locations, even references to our future plans. It wasn't just an affair, it was a whole other life. By the time Eric finally walked through the door at 1 a.m., Amanda was waiting for him, but instead of yelling or crying, she simply held up her phone, the incriminating photo glowing on the screen. Who is she? Her voice was calm, but the fire in her eyes told a different story. Eric froze, his eyes darting between her and the phone. Amanda, I can explain. No, she said firmly. You're going to tell me everything right now. And just like that, the perfect life Amanda thought she had began to unravel. Eric stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locked on Amanda's phone. The photo of the dark-haired woman burned like a spotlight between them, and for the first time in their marriage, Amanda saw fear in his expression. Not guilt. Fear. Who is she? Amanda's voice was steady, but her pulse hammered in her ears. Eric stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Amanda, it's not what it looks like. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, really? Because it looks like you've been screwing another woman in a hotel room while I was at home planning our anniversary. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move closer. Instead, he shifted slightly, as if calculating his next move. It was the same measured look he always gave during arguments, calm, practiced, and infuriatingly detached. Look, he said finally, we need to talk about this, but not right now. It's late, and I don't want to wake the neighbors. Amanda took a step forward, her voice rising. You think I care about the neighbors? You've been lying to me for months, maybe years, and you expect me to wait until it's convenient for you. Eric raised his hands in mock surrender. You're not thinking straight. Let's just sit down. I'm thinking clearer than I have in a long time. She held up the phone again. You're going to explain who she is, and why you thought you could lie to me? Eric hesitated, his gaze darting to the staircase. Amanda's stomach churned. Was he looking for an escape, or was he afraid of what else she might know? Her name is Rachel, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. We met at a work event about 6 months ago. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. 6 months? It wasn't serious. At first, but then what? Eric's eyes hardened. Then I felt alive again. Amanda, I felt wanted. You don't get it because you've been so wrapped up in the house, the schedules, and playing the perfect wife that you forgot how to be my wife. The words hit her like a slap. Amanda staggered back, blinking away the tears that threatened to spill. Are you seriously blaming me for this? I'm not blaming you, he said quickly, stepping toward her. I'm just saying things haven't been right for a while, and instead of fixing it, we just ignored it. Amanda shook her head. No, you ignored it. You checked out I was here, waiting, supporting you, believing in you, and you threw it all away for her. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Amanda could barely breathe, but she refused to let Eric see her break. I want the truth, she said quietly. All of it. Eric exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. We've been seeing each other off and on. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but it does. Amanda finished for him, her voice flat. He didn't answer. That silence told her everything she needed to know. Amanda turned and walked toward the staircase. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. You can stay here and think about what you've done." "Amanda, wait." She didn't stop. By the time the sun came up, Amanda had already packed a suitcase and left the house. She needed space, time to think, and she wasn't going to do it under the same roof as Eric. Julia opened the door the second Amanda knocked. "I was hoping you'd come," Julia said, pulling her inside. Amanda dropped her bag in the entryway and sank onto the couch. "It's worse than I thought." Julia handed her a mug of coffee and sat beside her. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Amanda poured out the whole story, from the texts and receipts to Eric's weak excuses. "What are you going to do?" Julia asked. Amanda stared into her coffee. "I don't know, but I'm not letting him walk all over me." Over the next few days, Amanda started piecing things together. She hired a private investigator to dig into Eric's finances and his relationship with Rachel. What she uncovered made her blood run cold. Eric wasn't just having an affair. He was hiding money, bank transfers to an account Amanda didn't recognize, withdrawals in cash, and expensive purchases that never made it into their home. Julia was the first to connect the dots. "He's preparing to leave you," she said, flipping through the investigator's report. "He's getting everything in place before he walks away, and takes half of everything you own." Amanda's hands clenched into fists. "Not if I stop him first." Fueled by anger and determination, Amanda started documenting everything: emails, texts, financial statements, anything that could be used in court. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for her future. But Eric wasn't going down without a fight. One evening, he showed up at Julia's apartment, pounding on the door. "Amanda, we need to talk." Julia stepped in front of her. "You need to leave." Eric's eyes flashed. "Stay out of this, Julia." "Or what?" she shot back. Amanda's voice cut through the tension. "You have 2 minutes, Eric. After that, I'm calling the cops." He turned to her, his expression desperate. "You're making a mistake. You're throwing away everything we built." Amanda crossed her arms. "No, you did that. Now get out." When he finally left, Amanda felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but she knew this wasn't over. Eric was going to fight dirty, and she needed to be ready. The next morning, Amanda's lawyer called with news that sent chills down her spine. "Eric filed for divorce. He's claiming you abandoned the marriage and is pushing for full ownership of the house and assets." Amanda gripped the phone tighter. "He can't do that. He's trying. But don't worry. We'll fight this." Amanda hung up, her heart racing. She had trusted Eric with everything, and now he was trying to take it all away. But Eric underestimated her. Amanda wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for justice. And she wasn't backing down. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Amanda sat in her lawyer's office, flipping through the pile of documents that laid out Eric's latest move, a full assault on everything she owned. It wasn't just the house and assets he was after. He wanted control of their joint accounts, their investments, and worst of all, her grandmother's lake house, which had been passed down through her family for generations. Her lawyer, Melissa Grant, leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her notepad. "He's playing dirty, but it's not unexpected. We'll counter every claim. I just need you to stay focused." Amanda swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Melissa's eyes softened. "No men like Eric don't back down until they're backed into a corner." That was exactly what Amanda intended to do. Back him into a corner so tight, he wouldn't have anywhere left to turn. But first, she needed to get ahead of him. Amanda spent the next week working with the private investigator, gathering evidence of Eric's financial manipulations and secret accounts. What they uncovered was worse than she imagined. Eric wasn't just hiding money. He was funneling funds into an offshore account under Rachel's name. Transactions included plane tickets, jewelry, and even a down payment on a condo in Miami. "He's planning to disappear," the investigator told her, sliding another folder across the table. With her, Amanda's blood boiled, but she kept her composure. "Not if I stop him first." The turning point came when Amanda intercepted a phone call between Eric and Rachel, recorded by the investigator's surveillance equipment. "I'm tired of waiting," Rachel's voice hissed. We need to leave before she takes everything. Just give me 1 more week, Eric replied. Once the divorce papers go through, I'll transfer the rest of the money, and we'll be out of here. Amanda pressed pause on the recording and looked at Melissa. This is it. This is what we use. Melissa nodded. This changes everything. We can prove intent to commit fraud, asset concealment, and even abandonment. He's not going to see this coming. The day of the hearing arrived faster than Amanda expected. The courtroom was packed, with Eric seated at one table alongside his attorney, looking every bit the confident businessman. Amanda sat across from him, her spine straight and her hands steady. Eric barely glanced at her, but she could feel the smugness radiating off him. He thought he'd already won. Melissa wasted no time getting to work. She presented the evidence, the secret accounts, the offshore transfers, and the recordings. With each new piece of information, Eric's confidence began to crack. By the time Melissa played the recording of his phone call with Rachel, Eric's face had gone pale. This clearly demonstrates premeditated fraud and an attempt to strip my client of her financial security, Melissa said, her voice sharp. Furthermore, it highlights a blatant disregard for marital commitment and legal obligations. Eric's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was already done. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands. Mr. Lawson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Eric stood, adjusting his tie. This has all been blown out of proportion. The accounts were set up as part of a business venture, and the recording— Save it, the judge interrupted. I've heard enough. Amanda exhaled, the tension finally breaking. But the fight wasn't over yet. Outside the courtroom, Eric cornered her, his eyes dark with anger. You think this is over? He hissed. You can't win. Amanda stared him down. I already have. That night, Amanda returned to the lake house for the first time since the divorce proceedings began. She sat on the dock, staring out over the water, and let herself breathe. But the relief was short-lived. 2 days later, Amanda woke up to find her car vandalized, windows smashed and tires slashed. A brick sat on the driver's seat with a note taped to it. You'll regret this. Amanda's hands shook as she called the police, but deep down, she knew exactly who was behind it. Eric had snapped, and he wasn't finished yet. Melissa urged Amanda to file a restraining order, which was granted immediately. But Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. She upgraded the security system at the lake house, installed cameras, and kept a bat by the front door. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation, and it paid off. One night, Amanda woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. She grabbed the bat and crept down the hall, her heart pounding. The living room lights flickered, casting shadows across the floor. And then she saw him, Eric, standing in the middle of the room, his face twisted with rage. You ruined everything, he growled. Get out, Amanda said, her voice shaking but firm. He took a step toward her. You don't get to tell me what to do. Amanda gripped the bat tighter. I said get out. Before he could take another step, the sound of sirens filled the air. Eric froze as red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The front door burst open and 2 police officers stormed in. Freeze! Eric raised his hands, but his eyes never left Amanda's. This isn't over! He spat as they cuffed him, but Amanda knew it was. The next day, Eric was formally charged with trespassing, harassment, and violating the restraining order. It was the final nail in his coffin. Amanda stood outside the courthouse, taking a deep breath as the weight of the past few months finally lifted. Julia wrapped an arm around her shoulder. You did it. Amanda smiled. No, we did it. Eric's downfall wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming her life, and she wasn't looking back. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Amanda sat in the police station, her hands trembling as she signed the last statement for the night. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the weight of everything that had happened was finally starting to sink in. Eric had crossed the line. Breaking into her house wasn't just desperate, it was dangerous. Julia was waiting for her outside, pacing nervously. When Amanda stepped out, Julia rushed to her side. Are you okay? Amanda managed a nod. I think so. I just can't believe he actually did it. Believe it, Julia said, her voice sharp. He's been unraveling ever since you exposed him. This is what happens when someone like Eric loses control. They lash out. Amanda wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling small despite the victory. What if he gets out? He won't, Julia said firmly. You've got the restraining order, the trespassing charges, and now the cops have it all documented. He's done, Amanda. But Amanda wasn't convinced. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. No matter how much evidence she had, or how many charges Eric faced, she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't finished. The next morning, Melissa called with an update. Eric's lawyer is pushing for bail, but given the circumstances, the judge isn't likely to grant it. For now, he's behind bars. Amanda exhaled in relief, but Melissa's tone quickly turned serious. You should still be careful, men like Eric. When they feel like they've lost everything, they get reckless. Amanda spent the next week putting her life back together. She cleaned up the broken glass, fixed the damage to her house, and started planning what life would look like without Eric hanging over her. But then the letters started arriving. The first one showed up in her mailbox. No return address, just a single sheet of paper with the words, "You ruined my life, I'll make you pay." Amanda's blood ran cold. She called the police immediately, but with no fingerprints and no witnesses, there wasn't much they could do, except file a report. The second letter arrived 2 days later. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Amanda didn't sleep that night. She kept the bat by her bed and double-checked the locks at least a dozen times. Melissa pushed for Eric's bail to be denied, citing the letters as further evidence of his threat. The judge agreed, extending his custody until trial. But just when Amanda started to feel safe again, the final blow came. Rachel. Amanda hadn't heard from her directly, until now. The email appeared in Amanda's inbox late one night. You think you're so smart, don't you? Eric told me everything you'll regret crossing us. Amanda stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. She had underestimated Rachel. This wasn't just about Eric anymore. Rachel was involved, and she wasn't backing down. Julia didn't hesitate when Amanda showed her the email. We need to go to Melissa right now. The lawyer wasted no time filing an injunction against Rachel and pushing for further security measures. But Amanda knew this wasn't going to stop her. Rachel was just as dangerous as Eric, maybe more so, because she wasn't bound by a restraining order or pending charges. The next few days turned into a blur of anxiety and preparation. Amanda upgraded her security cameras, changed her locks again, and even stayed at Julia's place for a few nights. Then, one evening, Amanda's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something told her to answer. Amanda Lawson? Her heart skipped. Who is this? The voice on the other end was low and deliberate. If you think you're safe, you're wrong. The line went dead. Amanda dropped the phone, her hands shaking. That's it, Julia said when Amanda told her what happened. You're not staying here anymore. We're going to a hotel until this is over. But Amanda was done running. No, she said, her voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. They don't get to scare me out of my own life. The next morning, Amanda took the recording of the call to the police, who added it to the growing case file. Melissa pushed even harder, and Rachel was formally named as a co-conspirator in the investigation. The walls were closing in on both Eric and Rachel, and Amanda could feel it. But they weren't going down without a fight. The night before the next court hearing, Amanda's security cameras picked up movement outside the house. A shadow moved past the window, then disappeared. She called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, whoever it was had vanished. When the officers reviewed the footage, one thing was clear. It wasn't Eric this time. It was Rachel. Amanda's worst fears were confirmed the next day when Melissa called with an urgent update. Rachel's gone, she said. She's disappeared. No credit card activity, no phone calls. It's like she vanished into thin air. Amanda's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means we don't know what she's planning, Melissa replied. But you need to be careful. The fear Amanda had been trying to suppress came rushing back. Rachel wasn't just running. She was hunting. Amanda locked the doors, checked the windows, and kept her phone within reach at all times. She wasn't going to let Rachel win. But when the final confrontation came, Amanda wasn't prepared for how far Rachel was willing to go. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Drop a comment below, and let us know what you think so far. Amanda's heart pounded as she stared at the police footage of Rachel sneaking around her property. It felt like the walls were closing in again. But this time, Amanda wasn't just scared. She was furious. She slammed the laptop shut and looked at Melissa. How is she not in jail yet? Melissa leaned back in her chair, her expression tight. Because she's smart, she hasn't done anything they can charge her with. Yet, but we're close. She's slipping, Amanda. We just need one more piece of evidence. Amanda stood up, pacing the room. I can't keep living like this, watching over my shoulder every second. Julia crossed her arms. Then let's stop waiting for her to make a move. Let's set a trap. Amanda froze. What do you mean? We know Rachel's obsessed with Eric, Julia said, and she's terrified of losing him. What if we make her think he's cutting her loose? Melissa raised an eyebrow. That's risky. So is doing nothing, Julia shot back. We bait her, get her to show her hand, and let the cops take it from there. Amanda didn't love the idea of playing games, but she couldn't deny it made sense. Rachel had already proven she was unstable. If they could push her just a little further, they might catch her red-handed. The plan was set in motion. The next day, Amanda had the private investigator send Rachel an anonymous message, pretending to be Eric. We're done, don't contact me again. Within hours, Rachel's phone pinged the GPS tracker Melissa had secretly placed on it. She was on the move, heading straight toward Eric's apartment. Amanda sat in Melissa's car, gripping the steering wheel as they waited for the update. She's in, the investigator said through the phone. She used a key. Amanda's stomach turned. Rachel still had access to Eric's place, and she wasn't there for a friendly visit. Do you think she's looking for evidence? Julia asked. Or destroying it? Melissa said grimly. 20 minutes later, the investigator called back. She's out left in a hurry and didn't take anything. Amanda exhaled, but the relief didn't last long. Rachel was spiraling, and they all knew it. That night, Amanda barely slept. Every creak and shadow felt like a threat, but she stayed ready. By morning, the investigator had more news. Rachel had bought a plane ticket one way. She's running, Melissa said, flipping through the file. Good, Julia said. Let her. But Amanda shook her head. No, she's not running. She's regrouping. If we don't stop her now, she'll come back even worse. Melissa nodded. Then we move fast. I'll get the police to act on what we have so far. Amanda spent the next few hours preparing for court. She double-checked the evidence, rehearsed her statements, and mentally braced herself for what was coming. But before she could make it to the courthouse, everything exploded. Rachel showed up at the lake house. Amanda was in the kitchen when she heard the first knock, slow, deliberate. She peeked through the window and saw Rachel standing there, her dark hair wild and eyes burning with rage. Amanda grabbed her phone and dialed 911, but before she could speak, Rachel shouted through the door. You ruined my life. Amanda's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. The police are on their way. Leave now. Rachel pounded on the door. You think you can take everything from me and just walk away? Walk away from what? Amanda shot back. From a life you don't belong in? From a man who lied to both of us? Rachel froze. You don't know anything about me. Amanda stepped closer to the door. I know enough. I know Eric fed you lies the same way he fed me. But you're not here because of him, are you? You're here because you lost, and you can't stand it. Rachel's eyes flickered with something Amanda couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe even regret, but it vanished in an instant. You don't get to judge me, Rachel snapped. I'm not judging you, Amanda said. I'm stopping you. The sound of sirens cut through the air, and Rachel's eyes widened. She took a step back, panic flashing across her face. No, she whispered. This isn't how it's supposed to end. Amanda didn't move. She let the police handle it, watching from the window as they cuffed Rachel and led her away. By the time it was over, Amanda felt like she could finally breathe again. At the courthouse the next day, Rachel was charged with harassment, trespassing, and violating Amanda's restraining order. With the mounting evidence, the judge ordered her to be held without bail. Eric, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. With Rachel's arrest and the financial evidence piling up, his lawyer folded. Eric pled guilty to fraud and embezzlement, earning himself a 5-year prison sentence. Amanda sat quietly in the courtroom as the verdict was read, feeling a wave of emotions she couldn't quite name. Relief, closure, and maybe even sadness. Because as much as Eric and Rachel had hurt her, they had also freed her. Freed her to start over. Freed her to reclaim her life. Julia met her outside the courthouse, smiling. "You did it." Amanda smiled back. "We did it." And for the first time in months, she believed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Amanda stood outside the courthouse, the weight of the verdict pressing down on her shoulders. Eric was sentenced. Rachel was behind bars, but instead of feeling victorious, Amanda felt hollow, like the pieces of her life had been scattered, and she wasn't sure how to put them back together. Julia leaned against the car parked at the curb, arms crossed. "You did it, Amanda. It's over." Amanda shook her head. "It doesn't feel over." "It will," Julia said gently. "You just need time." Amanda nodded, but her thoughts were already spiraling. Time wasn't going to erase the fear that lingered in her chest or the nightmares that kept her awake. She had won the battle, but the scars would take longer to heal. Later that evening, Amanda returned to the lake house. The place felt different now, quieter, but not peaceful. She turned on the lights and stood in the living room, staring at the patched window where Eric had broken in. Every creak of the floorboards and shadow in the corners set her nerves on edge. She told herself she was safe, but the fear was still there, gnawing at her resolve. A sudden knock at the door jolted her. She grabbed the bat she kept by the couch and crept toward the entrance. "It's me," Julia called from outside. Amanda exhaled sharply and opened the door. Julia stepped inside, carrying a bottle of wine and a takeout bag. "I figured you could use some company." Amanda managed a smile. "You figured right." They sat on the couch, eating takeout straight from the containers and drinking wine. For the first time in weeks, Amanda started to feel normal, like the world wasn't closing in on her anymore. Julia set down her glass and looked at Amanda. "What's next?" Amanda shrugged. "I honestly don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." "Well," Julia said, "maybe it's time you did." The words stuck with Amanda long after Julia left. What was next? For so long, her life had revolved around Eric, his career, his goals, his needs. She had built a life around him, and now that he was gone, she wasn't sure who she was without him. But as the days passed, Amanda began to find pieces of herself again. She started working on the lake house, fixing things that had been broken for years. She took long walks by the water, letting the sound of the waves calm her mind. And slowly, she started to heal. But just when Amanda thought she could finally move on, the phone rang. It was Melissa. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice tense. Amanda gripped the phone. "What happened?" "Rachel escaped." The words hit Amanda like a punch to the gut. "What? How?" "They were transporting her to another facility, and she slipped away during a transfer stop. The police are looking for her, but so far, nothing." Amanda's knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch. "Oh my God." "I need you to stay calm," Melissa said. "We've already contacted the police and upgraded your security. You're safe." But Amanda didn't feel safe. Rachel was out there, and Amanda knew exactly who she'd be coming for. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and preparation. Amanda barely slept, keeping the bat and her phone within reach at all times. She double-checked the locks, tested the alarms, and reviewed the security footage obsessively. But Rachel stayed in the shadows. Days turned into a week, and still no sign of her. Amanda started to wonder if Rachel had fled the state, if she was finally gone for good. But then, late one night, Amanda's phone buzzed. A text message. "I told you this wasn't over." Amanda's blood ran cold. She immediately called the police, who traced the phone number back to a burner. No way to track it. No way to trace Rachel's location. That night, Amanda sat in the living room, the bat resting across her lap as she stared at the front door. She wasn't going to let Rachel win. Not this time. Around 3 a.m., Amanda's security camera app buzzed with a motion alert. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. On the screen was Rachel, standing in the driveway, staring directly at the camera. Amanda called the police, her voice shaking. "She's here." The dispatcher kept her on the line as officers were dispatched, but Amanda wasn't taking any chances. She moved to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and waited. Rachel didn't try to hide. She walked straight to the front door and started pounding. "You ruined everything!" Rachel screamed. "You took him from me!" Amanda's hand tightened around the knife. "Get off my property, Rachel. The police are on their way." But Rachel didn't stop. She pounded harder, rattling the door frame. Amanda took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "You're not getting in." The sound of sirens filled the air, and Rachel's pounding stopped. Seconds later, police cars skidded into the driveway. Officers jumped out, surrounding Rachel as she screamed and thrashed against them. Amanda watched through the peephole, barely able to breathe as they wrestled Rachel to the ground and cuffed her. It was over. This time, Amanda knew it was really over. The next morning, Melissa called with an update. Rachel's being held without bail, and with the new charges, she's looking at serious prison time. Amanda let out a shaky breath. Thank God. She hung up the phone and walked outside, standing on the dock overlooking the lake. For the first time in months, Amanda felt the weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't just relief, it was freedom. She had fought back, she had survived, and now she was ready to start over. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Amanda sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the crack of sunlight breaking through the blinds. It had been 3 days since Rachel's arrest, but sleep still felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Every shadow in the room felt like it was closing in. Every creak of the floorboards made her stomach tighten. The lake house, once her sanctuary, had become a fortress, locked down, monitored, and guarded. But no amount of security could erase the memory of Rachel's face, staring directly into the security camera, her eyes wild and unhinged. Amanda forced herself to get up. She had a meeting with Melissa that morning, and she couldn't afford to let fear win. Not now. By the time she reached the law office, Julia was already there, pacing the waiting room. "Tell me you've got good news," Amanda said, setting her bag down. Melissa stepped out of her office, files in hand. "We've got progress. Rachel's being denied bail again, but she's refusing to cooperate, and her lawyer is pushing for a mental health defense." Amanda's heart sank. "Meaning, what, that she gets off easy?" Melissa shook her head. "Not necessarily. It's a gamble, but it also means the case could drag on for months, and until the trial's over, we need to stay prepared." Amanda clenched her fists. She's not going to stop. "That's why we're not stopping either," Melissa said firmly. "We'll push back on the defense and use every piece of evidence we've gathered to make sure she doesn't walk away from this." After the meeting, Amanda and Julia headed to the cafe down the street. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," Amanda admitted, stirring her coffee. Julia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've come this far, Amanda. You didn't let Eric break you, and you're not going to let Rachel win either." Amanda nodded, but the exhaustion in her bones made it hard to believe she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of feeling like a prisoner in her own life. Later that night, Amanda returned to the lake house. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, staring at the security monitor. The footage from Rachel's last break-in replayed in her head. The pounding on the door, the screaming, the rage. A sudden alert flashed on the monitor. Motion detected. Amanda's heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed the bat and crept toward the window. The cameras showed nothing but trees swaying in the wind, but Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. Her phone buzzed a text message. "You're safe now, rest." It was from Julia. Amanda exhaled and set the bat down, reminding herself that Rachel was locked up and couldn't hurt her anymore. But the unease lingered. The following day, Amanda met with Melissa again, this time to go over the final preparations for court. Rachel's mental health defense was falling apart, and the prosecution was ready to move forward with charges for stalking, harassment, and attempted assault. Melissa looked confident, but Amanda still couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. And she was right. That night, Amanda received another message. "You'll never see me coming." The number was blocked. Amanda's blood ran cold. She immediately called the police, but without proof that it came from Rachel, there wasn't much they could do. The next morning, Amanda woke to find her front door wide open. She swore she had locked it the night before. She checked the cameras. Nothing. No alerts, no signs of forced entry. But the sense of dread in her chest wouldn't go away. Melissa called later that day with an update. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice tight. Amanda braced herself. "What is it?" "Rachel made a deal. She's agreed to testify against Eric in exchange for a reduced sentence." Amanda's stomach dropped. "What?" "She's claiming that Eric manipulated her into everything, that he was the mastermind, and she was just following orders." Amanda couldn't believe what she was hearing. After everything Rachel had done, after everything Amanda had been through, she was trying to shift the blame. "She's lying," Amanda said through gritted teeth. "Of course she is," Melissa replied. "But it's enough to give the defense leverage. We're going to fight it. But it means we need more evidence to prove Rachel wasn't just a pawn." Amanda felt the anger rise in her chest. "Then let's find it." She spent the next 2 days digging through old files, emails, and messages. Julia helped her piece together a timeline of Rachel's actions. Every phone call, every letter, every threat. What they found was damning. Emails from Rachel to Eric, detailing their plans to isolate Amanda, drain her accounts, and frame her as unstable copies of hotel reservations and flight tickets that proved Rachel wasn't just an accomplice. She was an equal partner in the scheme. Melissa wasted no time presenting the new evidence in court. Rachel's defense crumbled. The judge rejected her plea deal and reinstated the original charges, adding conspiracy and attempted fraud to the list. Rachel broke down in court, screaming at Amanda as she was led out in handcuffs. "You think this is over?" Rachel shouted. "You'll regret this." Amanda didn't flinch. She sat tall, knowing she had won, not just the case, but her freedom. Outside the courthouse, Amanda took a deep breath. Julia hugged her. "You did it," Amanda smiled. "We did it." And for the first time in months, Amanda felt the weight lift. The nightmares didn't disappear overnight, and the scars didn't vanish. But as Amanda walked back into the lake house later that evening, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid anymore. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Amanda stared out at the lake, the water reflecting the pale glow of the moon. For the first time in weeks, the house felt quiet. Too quiet. Rachel was locked up, Eric was facing years behind bars, and yet the uneasy feeling in Amanda's chest refused to fade. She clutched the warm mug of tea in her hands, but even that didn't stop the chill running down her spine. Melissa's last update echoed in her head. Rachel's defense is falling apart, but her lawyers are grasping at anything they can. They're painting her as the victim, manipulated, scared, and desperate. We have the evidence to shut it down, but until the judge makes a final ruling, we can't let our guard down. Amanda couldn't relax. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the silence. She jumped, nearly spilling her tea, before setting the mug down and grabbing the phone. Unknown number. Her breath hitched. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" At first there was nothing but static. Then a voice, low, shaky, and far too familiar. "You think you're safe?" Amanda's blood ran cold. "Rachel? This isn't over." The line went dead. Amanda's hands trembled as she dialed Melissa. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried Julia next. "Hey, what's wrong?" Julia answered immediately. "She called me," Amanda whispered, her voice shaking. "What, Rachel? That's impossible. She's in custody." "Well, someone's pretending to be her," Amanda said, and they knew exactly what to say. Julia didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over." Amanda hung up and double-checked the locks. She checked the security system twice before grabbing the bat from under the couch. She wasn't taking any chances. By the time Julia arrived, Amanda was pacing the living room. "Okay, first things first," Julia said, pulling out her phone. "We're calling the police." The officers arrived within minutes, sweeping the property and checking the locks, windows, and perimeter. They didn't find anything suspicious, but Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel, or someone working with her, was watching. "She's in custody," one officer assured her, "and we'll verify that immediately. If anything seems off, we'll let you know." But Amanda didn't feel reassured. The next day, Melissa called with an update. "You were right," she said, her voice tense. "Rachel is still in custody. But that call, it came from a burner phone, registered outside the facility. We think someone sent the message for her." Amanda's stomach dropped. "Who?" We're working on it, but it might be one of Eric's old contacts. He had a lot of shady connections, and Rachel's smart enough to exploit them. Amanda's grip on the phone tightened. So what now? Now we bring this to the judge. This proves Rachel isn't just unstable. She's dangerous. It's going to seal her fate. Amanda exhaled, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down. Later that evening, Amanda and Julia sat in the living room, going over the evidence one more time. Emails, recordings, surveillance footage. It all pointed to Rachel's guilt. But as Amanda flipped through the files, something new jumped out at her. An address. "What's this?" Amanda asked, pointing to the highlighted entry. Julia leaned over. "Looks like a storage unit Rachel rented a few months ago." Amanda's heart skipped. What if there's more evidence there? Julia hesitated. "We should tell Melissa." "No," Amanda said. "If there's something in there that can shut this down once and for all, I need to see it for myself." Against Julia's protests, Amanda decided to check out the storage unit the next morning. The facility was nearly empty when Amanda arrived. She parked near the office, scanning the lot for anything suspicious before heading inside. The manager handed her the key after verifying the documents Melissa had sent over. As Amanda unlocked the metal door and pulled it open, her stomach tightened. The unit was cluttered with boxes, clothes, and old furniture. But it didn't take long to find what she was looking for. A box labeled Eric Personal. Amanda tore it open, her hands shaking as she flipped through the contents. Bank statements, legal documents, and a hidden folder filled with photos of her. Photos taken without her knowledge. Photos of her at the grocery store, walking the dog, sitting on her porch. Amanda's breath caught. This wasn't just Rachel's obsession. It had been planned. Suddenly, a noise behind her made her spin around. "Rachel." Amanda's heart stopped. Rachel stepped into the unit, closing the door behind her. She looked disheveled, her hair messy, and her eyes wild. "They let me out early," Rachel said, her voice soft but unsteady. "Good behavior." Amanda backed away slowly, her eyes darting toward the exit. "Stay away from me." "You don't get to walk away from this," Rachel said, stepping closer. "You ruined my life. You took him from me." "No, Rachel," Amanda said, her voice firm. "Eric lied to both of us, and now he's paying for it. You need to let this go." Rachel shook her head. "You don't understand. He loved me. He promised me everything, and you destroyed it." Amanda spotted a metal pipe leaning against the wall and edged toward it. "You don't want to do this, Rachel." Rachel's expression hardened. "You have no idea what I want." Before Rachel could make another move, Amanda grabbed the pipe and swung. Rachel dodged, but the distraction was enough for Amanda to sprint toward the door. Rachel lunged, grabbing Amanda's arm, but Amanda fought back, shoving her into a stack of boxes. The commotion drew the attention of the facility manager, who called the police. Within minutes, officers swarmed the unit, pulling Rachel off Amanda and pinning her to the ground. Amanda collapsed against the wall, shaking as the adrenaline wore off. Rachel screamed as they dragged her away, her voice echoing through the building. "This isn't over." But Amanda knew it was. Later that night, Julia sat with Amanda at the lake house. "It's really over now," Julia said softly. Amanda nodded. "Yeah, it is." And for the first time, she actually believed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Amanda sat on the dock of the lake house, her bare feet dangling above the water. The ripples reflected the golden glow of the setting sun, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt peaceful. She inhaled deeply, letting the cool evening air calm her nerves. It was over. Rachel had been taken into custody, again, and this time there were no loopholes, no bail, and no plea deals. The charges against her were airtight, from stalking and harassment to attempted assault. The evidence Amanda had uncovered in the storage unit sealed Rachel's fate. She would be spending the next several years in prison. Eric's sentencing had also been finalized. With Rachel's testimony disproven and his fraudulent activities fully exposed, he was sentenced to 7 years behind bars. Amanda had attended the sentencing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom as the judge listed out his crimes. Eric didn't even look at her. It was as if the man she'd spent years loving had disappeared, replaced by a stranger who barely recognized her. But Amanda didn't need his acknowledgement. She didn't need an apology. She had given up looking for closure from him, and instead found it in herself. Melissa had been right all along. Men like Eric didn't stop until they were backed into a corner, and Amanda had backed him so far into one that he couldn't claw his way out. Julia stepped out onto the dock, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She handed one to Amanda and sat down beside her. "To new beginnings," Julia said, raising her glass. Amanda smiled and clinked her glass against Julia's. "To new beginnings." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip lower over the horizon. "You know," Julia said, swirling her wine, "you should write about this. Or better yet, start a blog, call it Surviving the Storm. Or something dramatic like that." Amanda laughed softly. "I think I've had enough drama to last me a lifetime." Julia smirked. "Yeah, but think of how many people you could help, people who feel trapped, scared, like they'll never get out. You did it, and you're stronger because of it." Amanda considered the idea. She had been through hell and back, but if her story could help even one person find their strength, maybe it was worth telling. In the weeks that followed, Amanda focused on rebuilding her life. She sold the house she had once shared with Eric and kept the lake house, turning it into her permanent home. She painted the walls, replaced the broken windows, and filled the space with light and warmth. She also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, working with survivors of domestic abuse and emotional manipulation. It gave her purpose, reminding her how far she'd come and how much further she could go. One afternoon, Amanda received a letter in the mail. Her hands tensed as she recognized the prison return address. It was from Eric. She debated whether to open it, but in the end, curiosity won. "Amanda, I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that what I did wasn't just about greed or selfishness. It was fear. Fear of failing. Fear of not being enough. I let that fear turn me into someone I don't even recognize anymore. I'm sorry for hurting you, for betraying you, and I hope one day you'll be able to move on and be happy. Eric." Amanda folded the letter and tucked it away in the back of a drawer. She didn't cry. She didn't feel anger. She simply felt done. For her, this was the final chapter, the one where she let go of the past and stepped fully into her future. Months later, Amanda stood at the lake's edge, watching Julia chase her dog along the shoreline. Laughter rang through the air, and Amanda couldn't help but smile. This was what freedom felt like, not just the absence of fear, but the presence of joy. She had faced the storm, weathered it, and come out stronger, and while the scars were still there, they no longer defined her. Amanda had reclaimed her life, on her terms. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she knew this was only the beginning. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales like this one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.